Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's show on Slater Success Live. We are doing things a little different. We're shaking things up, which is always fun and exciting. So we're interviewing two people from two different perspectives. And if you can't hear the sirens coming out the windows, we are coming live from New York City. So today we're having two perspectives. One, an attorney, Alex Berke, is an employment lawyer and provides advice and counsel to employees and employers on sexual harassment, discrimination cases, including pregnancy, disability, race, and gender, as well as religious discrimination. So now we have our law perspective. And the other guest today is Dr. Melba Sullivan. She is a licensed clinical community psychologist, executive coach, people, culture, and systems consultant with more than 3 decades of experience in leadership. Her company, The Freedom Flow Solutions, reduces stress, promotes resilience at work, in community, and at home. Our conversation today is going to center around running the Return to Work Marathon. Okay, so Alex, welcome. Dr. Melba, welcome. Thanks for joining me here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So, this is a first time, haven't done this live on LinkedIn, where we're having a conversation with more than just two of us. We're looking at a variety of different perspectives. Now, interestingly enough, I know when my kids were young, I would be like, September is okay, back to school, vacation time's over, summer's over. We took our holidays at the end of August, and it was all this momentum of back to work, back to school. Now, back to school is still not looking so normal, but more normal than it did last year. But it's still not what it was. Mm-hmm. Back to work has this huge question mark with that. It's like, what does this look like? Are we back in the office at all? Are we back part-time? Are we back very few full-time, yet there are some? And then what is the full perspective of this? How do people feel about it? Are they, how are the companies dealing with it? How are the decisions structured? I had so many questions to ask you ladies that I wanted to understand for myself as well as my clients, but I want you to jump in and, let's start with Alex. What is back to work looking like from two sides of the coin? One, what you're seeing with your clients, as well as you are part of a law firm.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it's kind of the question of the moment. Back to work, it's interesting to think about the kind of back to school feelings. What did you do last summer? Like, what did you read? Where did you go? And now as we're approaching these questions of like going back into the workplace, it's really, a lot has happened since people left, right? There's been pandemic, obviously, there's been the COVID pandemic, and then there's been a lot of other questions in our country about how we deal with things, and there's been a racial reckoning. So some people think of it as two pandemics. So I think that, a very important thing as we start to think about the details of the decisions we need to make before going back to work is first just recognizing like people aren't just coming back all the same, feeling the same things. They haven't all experienced the same things over the past 18 months. And it's not necessarily the same kind of like joy and energy about returning to work that you might have, you might think there could be.
Yeah, no, it's true. I remember, going back to the office after Labor Day, and there was a high energy level of excitement. The sharing, oh, did you go to the beach? Oh, I went across country. I saw a national park. I kayaked for the first time. There was all this high energy of sharing some of the fun things people have done over the summer. Dr. Mel, what are you seeing? I mean, there's a whole emotional toll when we look at transitions.
Yes, exactly. I have been noticing, and this is what I've been talking to Alex about a lot, right? The context is decisive. And I think there's a lot of assumptions that we all make that we're navigating the same contexts when we're not, right? And a lot of us don't think about how the contexts are shaping us. And when I say context, I mean our relationships with other people we like, people we don't like, our family members, our coworkers, our neighbors, right? The way that we move in community, right? We're in a time and place and where what it means to live in certain places, it means a lot, even if you go one county or one town over. And so the things that are shifting and that make our context unique have gotten more amplified in this space and time with these pandemics. And so what I'm noticing, I always say that COVID and the racial reckoning and our healthcare system and all the things that are happening in these spaces have really led people to sit with all that time we were in quarantine, even though that was like a year ago. Actually, it wasn't. It just ended probably in the spring, right, of this year. We were all pretty much sitting with that question of how you living, and how's that working for you? And for a lot of us, that shifted where work fell in our priorities. It shifted where certain relationships fell in our priorities. So while we all cognitively know that change, the only constant in life is change, and we know that here, but we're in a time and space in our lives where the change is so constant, and so is the uncertainty, and so is the anxiety that is showing up with that. And so is the unique ways in which our particular context. So we've got people on our teams who actually have thrived working from home. Yeah. And then we have other people who are like, when can I get a wall? When can I get a physical boundary between my family and me, even sometimes pets, right? Because those are, as often we'll see a pet walk across the screen as we will see a child or a partner who's half dressed or whatever it may be. So I think there's just this a bit of fatigue, honestly, around all of the decisions we're making, the constant change, the rapidness with which things change. Those are the natural reactions and responses to that. Our anxiety, our sitting in the what if, our being with the unknown. And for a lot of us, it feels, a sense of control feels comfortable. And that has just been taken away.
We have been out of control. As you were talking, I had this image come to me, and I often have images of amusement parks. Okay, we loved going to amusement parks when I was younger as a family. And there were rides that stand out for you. And as you were talking, I thought about that ride that went that whipped around. And you turned the thing in the middle, and the thing turned, and then this thing, you had the bigger turn and then the smaller turn. And, Alex had made me think of you. It's like, okay, so the employers are that big wheel turn, and the employees are the little turn, and you just hope you're going in the same direction, and you're hanging on for dear life because you don't know how long you're going to be spinning. And it can't be easy. We always want to take a stand for the employees, of course, but it also can't be easy for the employers and the decisions they're making.
No, I agree. And I think that it's hard enough. Work generally exists to do a job, right? The employer is trying to get something done, and they're relying on their employees to help get something done. The context that we're living in now demands that not only are we, in many cases, reimagining how to get our goals done in this situation, we also have to deal with a lot of really difficult questions. We're dealing with vaccinations at work. We're dealing with concerns from parents whose kids are going back to school, but they might still have to come home. And, we talked about when quarantine ended, and it's, in some ways, it's all different for different people. And these are very complex, challenging questions to address. And I do have, I think I work with employers and employees, and I work with employers who are trying to address these questions well, but it's not easy. And in every single case, it demands not just understanding the laws, which themselves are changing. I'm on a listserv of employment lawyers who are sending around new orders that were released today about the vaccination requirements in New York State. I mean, it's all still changing, but there needs to be communication between the employers and the employees. Otherwise, it's hard to understand how everyone's going to be turning the wheel in the same direction.
It's interesting. We had a guest a few months back who was really good at that communication piece. Mm-hmm. And in the height of the pandemic, he put into a system in place of doing live streams with his entire team, several times a week. And one of the game changers, and his business has really grown internationally during this pandemic, is he goes, you know what? We decided to just keep it going at least once a week because we found the stream of communication with our people was so valued that he said, he goes, our team members' spouses was leaning in to our company because they're like, well, why aren't our leaders talking to us like this? Dr. Melba, what do all of us need? Communication is we could do 8 hours on communication,
right?
The pros, the cons, but yes, we're quote unquote out of isolation, and yet we're not out of isolation.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how did communication come into effect? How can we do better? How do we do well? How do we survive?
So communication is a how. It is a specific how that is linked to a bigger what, which is valuing the physical and emotional safety of people. Right. And that's really why I predict that happened with the person that you mentioned, is that they were in communication, but there was something happening in that communication where it was clear that the health and well-being, the physical well-being as well as the emotional well-being, were being valued, respected, and there was a level of curiosity about that, and a level of, we can hold more in community than we ever can hold on our own. And so I
want you to repeat that, because that's a really, really powerful comment, that we can hold more in community than we can hold on your own. Can you expand a little bit about that? Because there's a big thing there.
Sure. We hear a lot about American culture being like this individualism, and it's in some ways it's linked to that there's a way in which we've been conditioned to believe, those of us who are high performers and high achieving, there's been a lot about like doing it on our own or how we've earned individually. And the reality of it is, particularly when we're under stress, we can hold more when we join up as a team. Right, as a collective, there's literally something else that is actually bigger than any of us that becomes available. So we can hold more. If I'm feeling isolated, if I'm feeling lonely, if I'm feeling confused, if I'm feeling incredibly anxious, I actually have a greater capacity to tolerate that if I share that with somebody. If I know that I'm not the only one that's navigating, even if I don't know the details of it. So one of the things when I work with organizations that I offer, and I'll model it, and then I'll say, I'll start every meeting that I lead. We're going to do a check-in. Now, some employees get real freaked out about that. They're like, nobody is interested in having a group therapy session. Exactly. Nobody's interested in having a group therapy session. Even your most vulnerable employees aren't interested in that. But people are interested in feeling seen and feeling heard, and in knowing I'm not the only one that is dealing with this, and I don't have to sit with this by myself. So just checking in, like one word, or offering an opportunity for people to see and hear each other and hear their experience reflected, or know that they're not, for global companies, even knowing they're not the only one that's sitting in a particular community. I remember running it was a mindfulness group, and one of the takeaways was people were asking about a recipe because somebody came on camera eating this incredibly delicious meal, and we were a good 11 hours apart between the different people who were in the call, and everybody just literally leaned in and were like, "What are you eating?" And afterwards, she was like, "It was delivery," right? But just that opportunity, they were more interested in.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is the realness, and we miss that. Matthew Hagan just popped in and said, "Return to work," and I've actually worked more than I would have if I had commuted like I used to, which is very true. A lot of people are experiencing that. Mm-hmm. And went on to say, this point on holding more in community is a valuable gem. What could I do if I was more connected? Alex, in working with your clients on both directions, that connectivity, how are you guiding, especially your employers?
Well, I think that, it's always complicated to tell employers and employees to talk, because there's a lot of questions about what am I allowed to say? What am I allowed to ask? Not wanting things to turn into group therapy sessions. But I think that in terms of being connected, we're certainly, I think more than what I'm telling people, I'll tell you what I'm hearing is not happening. I'm having more and more people contacting me and employees telling me that they doubt the humanity of their employers. Ooh. Right? They're like that
hurts.
Come up a bunch of times. And I think it's because people are giving a lot to their jobs, even while remote, maybe even more, as this person is saying. And, so if they don't have anyone asking them anything about how they feel, what they think, what their questions are, like, they're gonna be concerned and frustrated and reach out to me. But I think Melba might have some other thoughts.
Sure. I mean, one of the things that shows up around communication, it's transparent communication is what facilitates trust. Mm-hmm. So, reflective communication facilitates that sense that you see me, you hear me, I'm valued. And transparent communication, even when it's, I don't know. We like, this stuff changes every day, even to say we're thinking about it. We actually are sitting with this decision versus going into silence. But the more that employers and leaders are letting go of top-down hierarchical ways of leading and being more in this sort of collaborative space, being curious, what's working for you, what are your asks, what do you want, and also being transparent about, like, I can do this, but I can't do that, or I'm taking this under consideration. That's the ask. It's not the ask that you include everybody in the decision, right? Or that the outcome is that you've got 100% agreement on that. And some of this is stuff that folks already know. It's more like there's just a safety that comes and a trust that is built when there is transparent communication. And that is part of what reminds everybody that it facilitates its own sense of connection, its own sense of community, and its own sense of, oh, I don't have to deal with this on my own, whether I'm the leader, whether I'm the employer, or whether I'm the employee, that there's somebody else, there's this organization and I are continuing to be a good fit because they at least are considering what the impact is. They're at least seeing that actually I put in more hours when I'm working virtually because I don't have to walk down the hall or go across town to a meeting. And then things get back-to-back scheduled, that there's at least an acknowledgement that that's how things have shifted for me in this virtual space.
And go ahead, Alex.
I would also just add that I think, people, when employees and employers are communicating about tough issues, like employees are expressing anxiety about returning to work, maybe they're anxious about leaving their homes for the first time, maybe they're anxious, regularly going on the subway, leaving their kids who are unvaccinated. The employer doesn't need to respond immediately. Sometimes there's a lot of power in listening. Getting back to people, as Melba's saying, okay, I don't know exactly how we're going to handle this, but I'm going to look into it and get back to you. And I think that where people sometimes get in trouble is when they start bringing their own, we all are having such different experiences. So just because you're not anxious doesn't mean this person isn't, and maybe isn't even relevant to their.
Yeah, and I just want to weigh in for a sec. So Sadiqa has just commented, this is a great conversation around, and so important topic. It's such an important topic. And it's interesting because the three of us are sitting here discussing open communication and the value of open communication. And one of the key things I know when I do communications trainings for clients, one of the key things is listening. And it's not about responding. It's not about giving. And I think, the top tier employers are struggling in the sense that they don't have the immediate answers. They don't have all the right answers, or what was considered right back in the day, in quotes there. That where this is a moving, evolving thing. And we know what we know today, and we don't know what we don't know tomorrow. And it's okay, even when you're at the top of your authority as the CEO of a company, to come out and say, you know, I don't know, we're figuring it out, but we're curious about getting your feedback and weighing in. So as things are moving, we can actually support our people as best as possible.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that's happening is, there's one of my favorite Bruce Lee quotes is that when under duress, we do not rise to our expectations. We fall to our training level. Yeah, and the way that I interpret that, right, is when under stress, the stress of a pandemic, the stress of having to reevaluate your work-life blend, right? The stress of having to reevaluate your friends. That friend that was a good friend in 2019, you may have had some experiences in the last year and a half where you're like, ooh, not so much. Or family, right? That is some serious stress, and it's pretty much in every context of our lives. So we're not prone. Our habit is not going to be to go and have a courageous conversation. It's not going to be to get into reflective listening. It's not even going to be to say, ouch. We're going to go into like survival strategies. So we're going to fight. We're going to flee. We're going to brace and endure. We're going to fit in and fawn, because for some of us that is safer, to be like scanning the environment and trying to figure out what I need to do to please you so you can leave me alone. So we're going to go into micromanaging, or we're going to just straighten them out and freeze and do the I'm fine, nothing to see here. And then you're going to put all of that in one room, and in that room you're going to have all these different ways that people are using to survive. And it's natural, it's not malicious, it's conditioned, it's a natural way of getting through. And so then the invitation, what becomes available, what leaders and employers and employees, the question that we're all invited to be in is, what's the vision here? Because when the pain is that intense, it's much easier to focus on the pain and the ouch and the right, and your fighting is going to bring me to fight, and then it's just a hot mess, right? So how do we start to cultivate the capacity to land and get centered and be clear about what we're committed to, what are our values? And then given that this is our value and this is the decision that we have to make, what is possible? Let's brainstorm around that. Let's brainstorm around the how. So if we're valuing physical and emotional health and psychological safety, how do we do that when it comes to mandated vaccines and some people not wanting to be vaccinated? How do we do that when it comes to making policies and practices around working from home or coming into the office, or or having to have our HVAC system and our desks 6 feet apart? Like, how do we? But it's really an invitation to come and get really clear and centered in what the employer and employees are. What's your values? What are you committed to? Yeah. And then figuring out the how from there.
So Matthew's asking a great question. Before I get to that, I want to just say what I'm hearing you say is, companies, take a moment and reconnect to the core values you created. And it might not be having the answers or the quote unquote, that right answer, let's go just for the best answer at this time, but base those answers and be in touch with the core values that businesses have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars establishing their core values, people. You bring in major consulting companies to help you, marketing agencies, coaches, consultants, executives on such levels to help you identify these core values. Touch base with them. That's what I'm hearing Melba say, touch base with them. Matthew's asking a really good question. What questions can leaders ask to uncover stress they may not be seen, and how do we create safer spaces for people to open up about what's really challenging them? And it's a great question, because you used to be able to pass somebody at their desk and you would have a vibe, a feeling, an emotion you would feel off of them, that you would lean in and touch base with them. We're all, three of us are on a flat screen here, people. We're on a flat screen. You're not getting any vibes. You might get a smile, a lift of an eyebrows, a twitch of a shoulder or something. And even that might be limited at times if you have a lot of people on the screen. The question is, how do you now pick up on your people and how they're doing, and how do you ask good questions, and what could those questions be?
You want me to take that, Alex? I think
you both could be weighing in on this, because
yeah, go ahead, Alex.
The whole idea is this is a variety of different perspectives.
For sure, go ahead.
I can say a specific thing, which is, when I think of employers listening to employees, I immediately think about reasonable accommodations, which is an important area of the law that's been really, really critical over this time. The idea is that there might be some shift in how you do your job, whether you are fighting to remain remote or dealing with like safety issues. And if you have a basis for that need, a disability, which could be anxiety, it could be depression, then, and the employer knows or should have known, then they need to have a dialogue with you. It's a cooperative dialogue. That's an official term. So what that means to me is, I think employers need to kind of expect, like everyone probably should know at this point that something might be up. So if you have an employee who is telling you or acting in such a way that they're not comfortable with going back to the office, then I think managers can be a good first step of like, just checking in, like, what are your questions? I'm sensing this. And so that's more of an individualized question. But I think that just even having a conversation that doesn't say, employee, you seem depressed, but more like, I sense that you're not interested in coming back to work, or you don't seem as excited about that we're getting closer. Why? Talk to me about it. But Melba,
there's the old expression that says, tell me more.
Right.
Yes. And leading with an observation, right? I see that this, that, and the third has happened, and I'm curious if you could tell me more about what's going on for you. The other thing is, we're in a time where actually the public health models that we have serves everybody. So in public health, there's this concept of universal precautions, which is all of this masking and vaccinating. That's universal precaution. And that is rooted in the assumption that everybody's got it. So just assume everybody's anxious and assume everybody's depressed, and then build protocols and practices into your workday that create space for that. Just assume it's true. And then, so again, it becomes a collective thing. We're all going to take a break. We're all going to take a break, and then be intentional about what you're modeling. So it may also invite you to be vulnerable, saying, I just want to, you could have some one-on-ones or some team conversations about, look, I just want to check in with everybody. There's like these wonderful wheels available online that have like these rainbow of all of these different emotions. It's one of my favorite practices, and you have people stamp. You can do that in the virtual space. You can do it anonymously, and it lets you know what all your team is sitting with. That it doesn't tell you who's anxious, but it tells you that your team is navigating anxiety. It doesn't tell you who's actually okay. It just tells you that somebody's content and peaceful. It tells you somebody on your team is furious. And then you can use that information to say, okay, let's take a break. Let's take a 30-minute break. I'm actually going to take a walk on my break. I'm going to look out the window. So there's my two pieces are move with the universal precaution that everybody is experiencing high levels of stress, anxiety, depression, and fear in ways that they never have. And then have practices built in and be very transparent about your personal practice of, I'm going to take a sip of water. I'm going to end my day at 4. I am committed to not sending you an email after 6:30. I may not always get it, but know that that's what I'm committed to, so that you have barriers and boundaries and separation between work. And then there is this piece of just asking, I saw that you looked a little sad, and I just want to check in because I'm making an assumption here. So could you tell me, like, how far am I this cold? Am I like hot, cold? Like, tell me a little bit more about what's sitting in your seat, and I'd love to know how I can support you.
So, what I'm loving about this conversation is it's drilling down to a couple of just really simple things that I'm hearing. Ask. Talk with people, not to people. Listen with both ears and your eyes and your heart. and see not just what is coming out of here, but what's coming out of all of us, the whole being of us. Sadiqa said she loved the reconnect to your core values. And she went on to say, I'm getting great vibes from all of you. Warm and inviting, ladies. Nice job. And Matthew went on to say, be intentional about what you're modeling. Great tip, Dr. Melba. Listeners, viewers, please know you can continue to watch, pick up tips, rewatch this and share this forward. If this meant something to you, you have questions, put it in the comments below. Alex and Melba and I are going to be continuing all week to touch base on this post and take a look and be there to answer any questions. As resources, let's take it in alphabetical order. Alex Berke, how can our employers and employees reach out to you, know more about you, about questions of around employment law and protecting ourselves, everything from the Back to Work Marathon to the Pregnancy Project?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I think people can find our website. I work at Berke-Weiss Law, spelled the way that my name is spelled here. And if you Google Alex Berke, you'll find me. You can give us a call or reach out, and we're always happy to check in. Our website also, we've done our best to put information out there so that, you might have some questions and see if you can find probably not the answers, but at least some direction.
And I think listeners, what's really important, and viewers, is what has been shared here is this information legally is consistently changing right now. So because you read something a week ago, a month ago, or somebody told you, reach out to a professional, whether it be Alex or any other professional, and get the facts and protect yourself, protect your organizations. Melba, how could our viewers and listeners learn more about you or be able to connect with you to learn more as we are dealing with the emotional side and the decisions around back to work?
Absolutely. So thank you for asking and for having us. I can be reached at freedomflowsolutions.com. freedomflowsolutions.com is the website for my company and our team. And it starts with a discovery conversation where we tailor our programs and really listen to what you're longing for your organization. I also can be found on LinkedIn. And the reason I mentioned my LinkedIn profile is because you'll see that there are different articles where I've spoken to this. There's an article that was written specifically about returning to work and the unique anxieties with some very practical tips on how to manage that. So my team and I at Freedom Flow Solutions, we just really enjoy, and it feels like play to us, to partner with companies and really co-create a workplace culture that honors the humanity of everybody on the team and really works to notice and identify that stress, reduce it, and promote the capacity to grow through it, which is the definition of thriving.
Wonderful. Ladies, I cannot thank you enough for joining me here today. This has been an awesome conversation. Listeners, come back next Thursday at 4 p.m. next week, where we're going to be continuing conversations with great leaders on visionary leadership and how it is showing up in the workforce today in a variety of different directions. Also, we are running on Her Success Story, my podcast. We are running a series on women leaders in cybersecurity. I have to say, I have been really interested in cybersecurity because things are changing. Technology is changing. The world is evolving. We're doing so much online. How do we, as business leaders, what do we need to know? So this is always what I'm looking for. Most importantly, Alex, Melba, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join me here today.
Thanks, Ivy.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, Ivy.
And listeners, remember to share forward, take this information, implement. If you've taken a moment to listen, thank you so much. Feel free to jot, what did you take away? What was most impactful and important for you today? And then what are you going to do about it? I love this theme of really listening, hearing, asking, and communication is always the greatest way to bring entire teams together for long-term success. See you next week.